Welcome to the Headley Highlight Show's Headley Headspaces. The Headspaces are a series of thoughts and musings I have during the course of the week, and I chew all over them and I share them with you. And this week's Headspace is called Trump's Ceasefire Trap. Before I jump into this week's Headspace, I just want to say thank you to all of the new listeners and new subscribers I've had to my channel. They're absolutely loving my royal stuff, which is fabulous, the Royal Corner, and I'm aiming to get to 1,000 subscribers. I've had to revise my subscriber ambitions because they've exceeded my last week's ambitions when I said I wanted to get to 500 by the end of the month. I got to 500 last week. I'm at 510. So what I'm trying to do now is to get to 1,000. So if you can help me get to 1,000 subscribers, that would be absolutely fabulous. Comment, like and share, and you can also join my show because it's live every Friday on X, where the Headspaces and the Royal Corners are features of the show. You can buy me a coffee at my website at deniseheadley.com, or you can subscribe to my YouTube at deniseheadley.com. If you type that in on YouTube, I'll pop up. Okay, enough with that promotion. Let's just jump straight back onto this Headspace. And I've entitled this Headspace, Trump's Ceasefire Trap. So just to provide a little bit of context, Ukraine is losing the war, and that's just a fact. They have been losing ever since this conflict began, irrespective of all of the weapons and money that they've received, and the propaganda promulgating as news that you've heard. And the reality is that Trump has squeezed the Europeans and Britain out, as well as Ukraine, out of the conversation about peace. They're seen as an impediment to peace. So we're at this point now, and the current state of affairs is a suggestion of a ceasefire was made for 30 days, which Mr. Putin said, thank you, but no thank you. This was being done at the same time that the Europeans and the British, led by France and Britain, were going around holding conversations with other countries to talk about the fact that they wanted to see peacekeeping troops enter into this conflict. In the meantime, they weren't invited to any of the top-level talks. They just had separate meetings where they drank tea and had bourbons and then were just shuffled out the side door, only to be yapping in their local presses, or being yapped about by those individuals who have to write those stories. Otherwise, their rags don't get any sales. Now, what happened was that Mr. Putin said, I'm not really accepting this ceasefire. You need to address the underlying conditions of the war, which, as far as I'm aware, the special military operation made very clear, which was the denazification of the Ukraine, the demilitarization of Ukraine, for Ukraine to remain neutral, and for no longer for it to pose a threat to Russia on its western border. Those are the only conditions that Mr. Putin has laid down, and those are the conditions that he needs to have met. Now, what happened is he refused the ceasefire, and then Trump started issuing all different types of threats and protestations. And of course, Mr. Putin did not acquiesce to those threats and protestations. He simply put on his fatigues. I don't know if you saw that. Yeah, you know, like how Zelensky always likes to run around wearing fatigues and military wear, and Putin, when he turns up, man's is wearing a suit. Well, on this occasion, Mr. Putin rocked up in his fatigues because, as far as he's concerned, he is still continuing with his military objectives. And that was a very clear sign. So in the meantime, Putin and Trump have a conversation, and then there's an agreement, a degree of an agreement, to stop, Russia will stop attacking particular types of installations in the Ukraine. And what people don't really understand is that these are infrastructure installations such as electricity plants and those types of facilities. And they've effectively destroyed most of them. So them agreeing not to destroy the last two is not exactly a loss. And I think that's basically that's happened. They've agreed to not to do any more of that for the next couple of days, with a view to conversations taking place with Zelensky to see what peace agreements he can, he is allowed to agree on. But this is where the problem comes, because Zelensky's not interested in peace. Neither is Europe, neither is France, neither is Britain, and neither is the Democratic Party of the United States, especially Hillary Clinton and all of those individuals who were absolute warmongers. They want to see a continuation of this conflict. So the demand now that Zelensky is making is those of peacekeeping troops. And it's a trap, in my opinion. And the reason I think it's a trap is because the idea of peacekeeping troops has absolutely no cogency. Mr. Putin said in an address on Wednesday that peacekeeping troops have to go through the UN. The UN needs to have an agreement and a meeting, and they then need to be sanctioned by the UN. They can't just go in irrespective, which is what France is saying, that the peacekeeping troops will be going there whether Mr. Putin agrees or not. The problem with the peacekeeping troops idea is that they will seek to continue keeping the US in the Ukrainian conflict. That will be an objective. And also, peacekeeping troops will help the UK to become further aligned with the European security policy, which is pretty strange because we left the EU. The problem with peacekeeping troops is that if they don't go through the UN, Putin said that they're going to be they'll be seen as combatants and they'll get annihilated. And then what will happen is Europe and the UK and France will run screaming to America and say, save us, save us. Trump will say to them, I told you in the beginning, I'm not backing this no more. I want to focus on my own domestic issues. And then he will be turned around and called a Putin puppet, a sympathizer, an appeaser. It will ruin his presidency and his domestic program. And hopefully, if the Democrats get their way, shoot them back into power. That's the reason why the ceasefire is a trap, in my opinion. The ceasefire is a trap if they include peacekeeping forces, boots on the ground, because this issue has been introduced into this arena so that it can effectively sabotage the peace negotiations. That's my position, if you weren't clear, or maybe I should have made it clear earlier. Peacekeepers, effectively, or boots on the ground, this is a disastrous and lunatic-based suggestion, because anyone with 2 ounces of sense knows that you cannot just introduce more troops onto the ground in a foreign country, because that's what's also called an invasion, and that means that I can defend robustly my borders, and that's what that is about. So this question of peacekeeping troops needs to be squashed by Trump. It needs to be expunged. It needs to be obliterated, eviscerated, annihilated, crushed, vaporized, and also pounded. So in conclusion to this particular headspace, I think the question around the ceasefire and Europe introducing the question of peacekeeping troops is a dangerous move that needs to be cut off at the pass. One thing that Mr. Putin understands is that he cannot trust the Europeans and the Americans. Anything they agree can and will be broken. This is the trajectory of the history of these relationships. And therefore, I think he's working right now thinking this is probably the best time for me to improve relations in America with the Russians. So I'm going to take it, but I'm not going to take it in such a way that's going to leave me completely exposed. He's fully aware of the cutout NPC Starmer, the Granny Harmer, and his role in prolonging this conflict. And because of his perfidious Albion, and I'm going to talk about that in a minute, because of his desire to be so good at being described as, having perfidious Albion qualities, basically treachery, being underhand, duplicitous as well, Mr. Putin knows he's got to tread carefully. Like I said about 15 headspaces ago, he could just release the Oreshnik, which is the hypersonic weapon, and Oreshnik stands for hazelnut. He could just unleash it, but he doesn't. He's fighting with a glove over an iron fist. And thank God for the fact that he is not as warmongering as those who are provoking him and his country. So that's my 2 pence on the ceasefire trap. It's a trap, and Trump should not fall into it. Because if he does, he'll be pushed off his agenda for domestic change, and it will ruin his presidency, in my opinion, because it will be a trap which will be set and sprung, and he will need to respond and be seen to be responding. So what's your thoughts, your 2 pence, your 3 cities, or your declining dollar price? Don't forget to subscribe to my YouTube channel, DeniseHeadley.com, or you can buy me a coffee or make a donation on my website named DeniseHeadley.com, or you can like, retweet, and share. Send me a DM or an email. But basically, do come back next week. And thank you so much for listening. And cut!